My favorite stories, my pride and joy, I think, was when the Amex Platinum had this special on Resi, where if you signed up through Resi, you would get 15 times points on any Amex Shop Small purchases. And we were redoing our backyard, and I convinced the vendor to sign up and become an Amex Shop Small business. And we got 5 times points and maxed it out. And we got 500,000 points to charge our card to redo our backyard that we were going to spend money on anyway.
Hey there, points people. You just heard a clip from Deanna Keene from the Points Fly Girl. Deanna is a full-time lawyer and part-time creator, showing people how to travel a whole lot more by spending a whole lot less. In this episode, expect to hear about how to choose whether to redeem your points or hold them. Like, for example, Deanna decided to use points to fully cover a trip to Ireland and Iceland, but decided to hold points for an upcoming Maldives trip and book the resort with cash instead, even though she had enough points to cover the trip. If you're in the market for a new card to earn points so you can travel like Deanna, check out geobreezetravel.com/cards. And if you're not sure what card is right for you, I offer free credit card consultations at geobreezetravel.com/consultations. We'll send you personalized recommendations based on your particular travel goals, budget, and lifestyle. And now, on with the show. Hey, Deanna. Welcome to the GeoBreeze Travel Podcast.
Hi, nice to meet you. And I'm so happy to be here.
I am so excited to have you here and to talk about a whole bunch of different places that you've gotten to travel. We can talk about Iceland, Ireland, you're going to Doha and the Maldives, so many different things. And some of them use points and some of them don't. So I think that'll be interesting to talk about today as well, as far as how to decide when it's a good time to use points versus when maybe to save your points and then use cash now and then use the points for some time later. But before we get into all of that, tell us a little bit about you. How did you get started in the world of points and miles?
It was a little bit of a bumpy journey. It actually, my first little toe into it was I was traveling on a whim. I found a deal on Groupon to Australia. It was a tour to New Zealand and Australia. And I was dealing with a stressful time in my life. And I text 3 friends and I'm like, hey, who would want to do this? And one of them texts me, let's go. So we buy a $4,000 trip on Groupon, kind of on a whim, and plan this trip to New Zealand and Australia. Well, as we all know, traveling doesn't always happen extremely smoothly. We did have some issues where we did have to deal with some delays. And my friend had a Chase Sapphire Reserve at the time. So he was like, let's go to the lounge. And that was the first time I had ever been in a lounge and I didn't know what was going on. So he actually kind of introduced me. He's like, yeah, this card is great. I get these points. I use them. And I'm like, oh, okay, I've heard about points. Was using them at a small level. I won't get into it. But I'm like, oh, this is actually sounds like it could be worth it. So then I started with the Chase Sapphire Reserve and I'm redeeming my points through the portal thinking that I'm totally killing the game, right? And I have friends because we're both Las Vegas locals, right? And there is someone in town who actually has a business where that a lot of my friends know and use, that they use him to help them use their miles on business class travel. And I'm like, wait, how are they doing this? Because I can't get enough points for business class because every time I look, it's 200,000 points, like 300,000 points. I feel like it's something I'm never going to learn. Long story short, COVID comes along. I got tired of just scrolling on Instagram and I'm like, I need to learn something new. And I'm like, well, let me start looking into that whole traveling on points thing. And I went down a total rabbit hole. So I was like really like learning how it went. And then I was using a lot of my points at the time to travel back and forth between Ireland because I had actually met my husband while he was in Ireland visiting in Las Vegas. So we did long distance between Vegas and Ireland, and we were both traveling a lot, and I was using my points through the portal, and I was getting some killer deals. I remember, I think I used like 5,000 points to go to Madrid for the weekend or something crazy, right? I would find these good deals and I would use them, but then I started to learn that they could be a little bit more valuable. During COVID, we were still separated because everything was slowed down. Even though we were married at that point, the whole visa process was slowed down. I started to learn more, and then I was focusing on getting us into essentially a higher level of travel. That was my goal. I know that's not everyone's goal. Some people just want to travel more, and that's basically what I was doing in the beginning. But then once I learned that I could actually be comfortable while I travel and stay in hotels that I didn't think I would ever want to spend money on or could even afford sometimes, then I was like, I need to learn this. So I got all into it. And now here I am using points and miles for a huge majority of my vacations, definitely taking me way further. I'm going on way more vacations than I ever thought I ever would or be able to afford. And now I'm honestly getting to the point that I have more points than I have PTO. So I have to slow down, which is very unfortunate, but it's a very good situation to be in, right? I have so many more points that I need to use, and then hopefully we'll be able to in 2026.
I'm sure a lot of people listening are thinking, how are you earning that many points and how many trips exactly are you booking per year and how much PTO is there? Like, what are the metrics behind these things?
At first, when I was first starting my content, I was like, well, I can kind of market myself as the regular person who works a 9 to 5. But quite honestly, I'm not a regular person that works a 9 to 5. I'm an attorney, more specifically, a public defender. My job is not normal. I am not really normal. But one of the huge benefits that we have that came out of COVID is a 3-day weekend. We don't work Fridays. So that has definitely played into my favor. So I know a lot of people don't have that extra ability, right? I can take 4-day weekends very easily by just taking one extra day off. Or if there's a holiday this weekend, for example, I would have been able to go off for 4 days without even requesting a day off. So, and then we also have some other little perks like floating holidays, including my birthday. So I get a few extra PTO days, especially because I have been with the county for so long. So I am in an unusual circumstance. I know not everybody can travel as much as I can. And even I couldn't travel as much as I do now 10 years ago, right? When I first started in this area. But I would say this year is a little bit crazier. We spent the end of December going into the new year in Ireland and then went to Iceland after. Then we are doing Doha, Maldives, and Singapore next. And then we are also going to France in May. So that's a lot just for this year. And I am actually using more days than my PTO. But again, unusual circumstance, I am able to carry over some PTO days. I was sure to bank those as much as I could. So now I'm going to be delving into that bank. So I am taking 3 international trips this year. I don't think there will be another one. I mean, I thought I was stopping at 2. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe I get crazy and decide to go to Europe for a 4-day weekend like I used to, but I highly doubt it. But yeah, I am traveling. I'd say at least 2 international trips a year, getting a little bit more adventurous. And then I try to do a little bit more domestic travel, especially in the summer, as Vegas isn't the most amazing place to be in the summer when everybody else is escaping in the winter, right? We want to be gone, and I want to be gone in the summer anyway. I think we hit like 120 this past summer, right? So I try to be gone as much as possible, but obviously all depends on schedule and what flights I find and things like that. But it just has truly become something that I enjoy now. I enjoy the strategy, the finding the flight, the hunt, the search, which I'm sure you do as well. And a lot of us do.
For sure. How are you earning enough points to travel in presumably business class a couple times a year over the ocean? There's 2 of you traveling. I'm sure some people are like, how are you earning all of these points as public defender?
Yes, I know. I do what I think a lot of us points and miles people focus on: welcome offers. So I am getting multiple credit cards each year which a lot of my friends felt like I was completely insane. Honestly, I had to start an Instagram for them to actually believe me and see what I'm doing and then fully understand it. So I think people think I'm less crazy, but my husband, I'm very lucky that he is full in on this. He never wants to travel economy ever again. So he's very happy to be a very good player too. Usually we'll just find a good card. I sign up. Sometimes I will refer him and he'll sign up depending on whether it's the best way to do it at that time, right? There's always an evaluation because sometimes they do have elevated offers, and then you're more interested in that elevated offer than I am in getting like a referral bonus, right? And sometimes it makes more sense for me to get the referral bonus. It's just a lot of focus strategy, right? Doing things at you getting the right card at the right time. You don't want to be you going over 5 of 24 if you don't have to. And also just taking advantage of some of the great things out there. One of my favorite stories, my pride and joy, I think, was when the Amex Platinum had this special on Resi, where if you signed up through Resi, you would get 15 times points on any Amex Shop Small purchases. And we were redoing our backyard, and I convinced the vendor to sign up and become an Amex Shop Small business. And we got 5 times points and maxed it out. And we got 500,000 points to charge our card to redo our backyard that we were going to spend money on anyway. Obviously, nothing like that is out there now. And if it is, I promise you guys, I will nonstop be promoting it all over my Instagram. That's a big thing, right? Things like that, focusing on welcome offers, seeing what's out there, getting the points when you can, getting those referral bonuses just from referring your spouse. And I think that was something that kind of blew my mind. I don't know if it does everybody else when I first started in it. I don't know why it's just kind of a thing. You don't think, oh, I can refer my boyfriend, I can refer my husband or wife or whoever else, or mother, or whoever else it is. I don't know why it seems like that is that allowed, right? But it's a great strategy for us to get those referral bonuses, especially when they're raised, and sometimes they're higher. And then we're both getting cards. And then once we finish a spend on a card, then we're looking at the next card. So it's constantly getting sign-up bonuses. I had somebody online ask me once, they said, well, how are you doing that while avoiding annual fees? And I was very clear to them. I'm like, look, I had never said I avoid annual fees. I have no problem paying annual fees. And I get not everybody's comfortable with that. I pay a very large number of annual fees. I have not calculated it yet. I will for my taxes this year, but because I do pay an annual fee, I know that I get so much more value out of it. So to me, it's worth it. It's great to be able to do that and just get all of those points and then use those points. And my focus is really just on flexible currency. I don't plan for a trip. There's maybe only one time I got a card specifically for a trip. I just focus on getting as many flexible points as I can. And then when I want to go somewhere, that's when I figure out how to work with what I've got.
Yeah, let's talk about the redemption planning process a little bit. So, as you earn more points and build up your points bank, and then you discover there's so many deals to be had, how do you decide here's where I want to go and when we want to go and where to transfer the points and whether to maybe not even use points?
Yeah. So with traveling, I mean, I try to keep it kind of open. And quite honestly, again, I'm lucky with this because my husband just doesn't, he's happy to go pretty much anywhere. And I'll just get somewhere in my head and decide, hey, I think I want to go here. Let me figure it out. And I've been lucky enough that everywhere I've come up with, I've been able to figure out. Norway, for example, that was somewhere that was on my mind. And I think it was because it was September in Vegas last year and it was still hot. Not last year, 2 years ago. And it was still hot and it was so hot. And we had spent, we went to Italy in the early summer and it was pretty warm in Italy, but it was okay. But then it was a pretty warm vacation. And then we came back to like nonstop heat. And I was just like, I need to go somewhere cold. So I just got my head stuck on Norway and I just started looking. And then lucky for me, there was a transfer bonus. I do love using transfer bonuses whenever I can, but that is not my be all end all. But there was a transfer bonus on KLM. And I did use a few different little creative strategies there because flying from Vegas would have been 90,000 points, which isn't the worst in the world, but I wanted to do better. So I found a flight from Chicago, and I'd have to look it up, but I think it was somewhere around 56,000 points. And we love Chicago, so I decided to just book the flight from there. And we were going to do a weekend away. I was somebody who didn't really think I would ever do repositioning flights. And a lot of that is because I'm a nervous Nelly to like, if my flight before got delayed or even canceled, right? I've been stuck in two major like meltdowns. So I'm like, I know that it can happen, right? But what I do when I reposition is I try to figure out in cities where I have family or friends or where I would want to spend the weekend. And that's so I'm not flying in 3 hours before, right? Let's do 2 nights there. Let's do 3 nights in the city to check it out. So I'm not worried about missing a flight. And then we can enjoy where it is. And going to Chicago, we were able to use points to stay at a hotel in Chicago. I was able to see my husband has a really good friend that lives there. One of my really good friends lives there. Had a great time over the weekend and then flew into Oslo. And then when we came back, we were able to find a pretty good deal to Vegas. So deciding on where we're going to spend points in cash, that all just depends. I evaluate the value. I think it was different before I flew business class, right? And so everybody has a different strategy, and I totally get it. Some people just want to fly for as little as they can, using as many points as they can. And I think that that's a great strategy. For me, now that I've realized how much my points can actually be worth, because I am not ever going to pay for a business class flight out of my pocket unless there's some kind of like steal that comes along, right? And I know that my points can be worth more with that. So, I mean, I wish I could give some kind of calculation and maybe I'll come up with one, but I do know for my Chase points, for example, I try to do at least 2 cents per point. I try to look at that too for my Amex. It's not a be all end all. I've definitely gone under that. It depends on my point stash, right? What I'm going to use them for, if I have a plan, things like that. But for example, our flights within Norway, that's the only thing we didn't use points on. And we could have at the time. At the time, it is with SAS Airlines. And at the time, they were a partner of Air Canada. And I could have transferred my points over to Air Canada. When I calculated the points versus, I think it was like $150 cash each, I said, we'll save the points. We'll use this one cash because I feel like those points can go a little bit further when using them on something else. So in Norway, though, we were lucky enough to use all of points on our flights to and from Norway and on all of our hotels. So Chicago, all 3 cities in Norway, and Amsterdam were completely covered on points. And that was extremely exciting. And I did spend a little bit more points than I had to. And that was just to expend in the trip, because I think it was somewhere around 75,000 points to fly business class from Bergen, Norway to Vegas. But for me, the trip was just a little bit too short. So I decided to call KLM and ask about their stopover program and how much they were going to charge me to spend 4 nights in Amsterdam. So with the KLM stopover program, you actually have to find saver fares on both the days for it to actually be quote unquote, for it to be free, right? No extra points. And it was not a saver fare on the day I was going out. I think the day I was going out, it would have cost 100,000 points. So what they told me was they quoted me at 90,000 points total for me to just do it all the way. And I felt that that was good enough for me, especially with the transfer bonus. It brought it down. I think it was 25%. So I was happy enough. I transferred over the points and I went ahead and did that. And then everything was just on one reservation. And if I would have waited, I probably would have got a much better deal, because then my mom ended up joining me on that trip and I got her business class on that flight back for 50,000 points. So that's another strategy for everyone to remember. I do the strategy, the booking out as far as possible. And that's because I need to plan around my vacation. I need to make sure that there's nothing major going on at work at that time, and I can easily schedule when it's from. But if you do have the ability for last minute, you can often find some really good deals last minute. And I know that there's people that only travel like that. Maybe one day for me, but for now, not. But for my mom, she's happy enough to fly economy because she's done it plenty of times. So I think it was like a little bit more of a risk for her, but it ended up working out.
So you used points for pretty much every leg of this Europe trip that you took. but you have an upcoming trip to, you said the Maldives and Doha, was it? And some other places?
Yes, Doha, Maldives, and Singapore. So everything for that is covered on points except for my Overwater bungalow in Maldives, which is a bit of an unusual situation, right? Most points people, you'll see it all over. They're booking their overwater bungalows with their points, and you can. And I actually did have 50,000 point certificates with Marriott that I got from a welcome offer, which is a very good welcome offer through them. And I had the ability to book an overwater bungalow through Marriott as well. But I chose not to. And the reason I did was because I actually happened to be on Travel Zoo, and now it's a paid service. It was free for so many years. I'm sure many people out there who've been traveling over the years are very familiar with it. They would send deals. And it was a very good deal on a very beautiful overwater bungalow in a hotel for 5 nights, and it's all inclusive. So I would have to look up the exact price. I don't remember what the exact price is. I want to say somewhere around $5,000, which I get is very, very pricey. However, when doing my research, and this is one of the things I do like to do a lot, is make sure and do my research. Number one, I paid the extra $200 to make sure that it was refundable. Because if I did happen to find a really good deal on points or however else, or I realized we needed to cancel, then I would be able to cancel and I wouldn't be out all that money. But number two, I did a lot of research on the cost of food and drinks in the Maldives. And there are a lot of people, I came across a few blogs that people spend thousands of dollars just on food and drinks in the Maldives. And my husband and I are drinkers. I came across a blog where somebody was saying they budgeted and they had like one drink the whole trip and then ended up spending, I think, $5,000 for 5 days. So to me, I'm like, well, I'm going to be out $5,000 on food and drink because neither one of us we're going to be on vacation. We're not going to want to budget. We're not going to want to watch what we're eating and what we're drinking. And then I'm going to be out all these points as well. So when I sat and did the math, I realized, I'm like, what? This makes more sense for us. The hotel gets great reviews. I always look at that, right? If I'm going to be booking somewhere, the hotel gets great reviews. The overwater bungalow looks gorgeous. And the food and the drinks are all included. So we will have a worry-free holiday. We'll pay up front. We know what we've spent. We're paying, I think, a little bit more than we would have had we just paid for food and drinks. I think, I don't know, we may have paid a lot more after we got our alcohol bill, but I think that it is the right move. I'll keep you updated after we go and I find out if it was, but I think it is, right? We don't want to be monitoring what we eat and drink. And something I found out through my research is that what I did not know is you cannot even take any alcohol into the Maldives. You can't go to the airport and buy a couple bottles of wine to keep in your room to soften the blow. Like, it's just not allowed there. So you can only buy your alcohol from the hotel, and these nice hotels charge a lot, and that's every single drink, and you've got a whole lot of free time. So I think food and drinks do start to add up. So that is why ultimately I did decide to book that trip with cash, and that was the only thing that we did book with cash because I felt that my points could be better used on another vacation.
Which resort is it in the Maldives that you ended up booking?
I would have to look it up because I remember I couldn't even really say it correctly. It's Vulvaru Angsagi or something like that. So I'd have to look up exactly what the hotel is, but it does look good. It's not something that's it's not a hotel that's extremely well known or anything. So I am taking a bit of a risk, but I think it's going to be great, right? Before Points and Miles, I almost exclusively traveled to boutique hotels and locations and worked out fine for me. I'm always alive in the end.
How did you book the flights for this trip? Where did you transfer your points and how many points did it cost?
So we are flying from DFU to Doha. And again, I when I reposition, I try to plan around family and friends. And I do have family in Texas. So again, we're spending the weekend there because I would be terrified to fly in a few hours before. So we are flying on Qatar. We have booked Q suites. I have heard that maybe you get them, maybe you don't. For me, as long as I've got a business class flight, I'm happy, but I am excited. Hopefully to check out the Q suites. So I transferred my points from American Express over to Qatar directly. And I believe we booked those for 70,000 points a person from DFW to Doha. I couldn't find a good deal directly to Maldives, so we figured we'll just check out Doha for a few nights, which we did end up booking 3 nights at one of the St. Regis hotels there in Doha, which looks amazing. And I am using 3 of my 50,000 point certificates that I was originally going to use on the Maldives. So I'm using those there. So that's completely covered on points in this like crazy hotel room with like an outdoor terrace and everything. So I'm very excited about that. Then I was able to find what was a good deal, and I would have to look up exactly how many, but I want to say we spent 40,000 points a person to book first class from Maldives or from Doha to the Maldives. So that's going to be my first time actually experiencing first class because I've never flown like the real first class. It's always been business class. So Qatar first, I think, will be very interesting. And I want to say that was around 40,000 points, maybe around 45,000. I remember it was a little bit more than I would normally spend, but it was still a good deal. So why not, right? Like go big on some of these experiences. And then when we're in the Maldives, we are flying Singapore Airlines direct to Singapore. That one I would have to look up as well, but I want to say that one was maybe around 60,000 points. And then the Singapore all the way to LAX, which is going to be an extremely long flight and probably the longest nonstop I've ever taken. But that one is, I booked that through Air Canada, right? Using the partners. I couldn't find anything on Singapore. I kept on searching Singapore. I even checked their stopover programs. I remember watching actually your YouTube on that to see if I could find them. I couldn't find any like saver deals on the stopover. And then it just popped up out of nowhere the day. I had a day in mind that I wanted to leave. And then the next day, a saver fare came up on Air Canada for, I believe it was 87. I believe their saver fare is 87,500 points. And I booked it for that. I think like the next month they announced a transfer bonus, but I'm not going to cry about that because who knows if that flight would have still been there, right? It was the perfect day. It all worked out great. Well, the booking did anyway. We'll see if the flight does, but I'm super excited about that because then that's taking us to LAX. And then the short little flights home, I'm okay to reposition on those because if I miss a Southwest flight, there's not going to be any tears. So we're just repositioning from LAX. It's very close, basically our neighbor. So that'll be a quick hop over from there. So we just are checking out everywhere on the way. And I'm very, very excited about this trip, which is coming up soon. I think it'll be here in about 3 weeks.
For people who are trying to decide, okay, should I wait for a transfer bonus so that I get a much better redemption, but I see a deal right now? Because you kind of alluded to that where you said you booked something shortly thereafter. It's a better deal because there's a transfer bonus, but your stuff is already booked. How do you balance, let's go for it now, let's wait for a better deal, but then the deal might not be there, but now we have FOMO, but now we have regret. How do you make those decisions and avoid the analysis paralysis that so many people go through when trying to book their vacation on points because they're trying to optimize for the best deal that they can find?
Yeah. And I think what people need to remember, right, is you almost never have the perfect storm, right? You want to go around a particular day, you want to go from a particular place, and you want to get a good deal. Finding all 3 is not always the easiest thing to have, right? If you find all 3, then jump on it right then. I don't care what transfer bonuses you think may be coming or may not. So you find all 3 leaving from your home airport and all of it, right? I would say just jump on it, number 1. But I think a lot of it just depends on how much flexibility you have. A lot of people have kids, right? And there's only a certain amount of time that they can travel, or they've got this event this time and this event that time, so they can only travel between a certain window. If you don't have a lot of flexibility and you see a deal, you jump on that deal. I wouldn't wait around for transfer bonuses. Number 1, we never know when they're coming. They are so random. You have no idea. And most people don't have points in every system to sit around and wait. Maybe this one's going to have a bonus, or maybe that one's going to have a bonus, right? So if you're waiting on just 1 or 2 credit cards, you don't know if they're going to have a bonus to that particular airline. So you're waiting for something that may not even happen, and then you're going to lose out on something. If you're incredibly flexible on both place, where you're flying from, and time that you go, then maybe wait like a month or two. But you need to understand, if you're going to be doing that, you need to be a gambler. You need to be a person that is going to be comfortable if those flights you can't find a good deal and you need to fly somewhere else, right? You need to be flexible on all levels if you're going to be letting go of a deal. If it's a location you want though, and you're finding a good deal, then jump on it right away, and don't cry when there's a transfer bonus 3 days later, because that has happened to me. I'm sure that's happened to you. It's happened to everyone, but it's part of it, right? You live and you learn, but sometimes you don't even need to learn. You got your flight at a great deal. Maybe it wouldn't have been around when there was a transfer bonus 3 days later, and you just don't know, right? Because we've all been there where you see a deal and then 3 days later you decide to go back and look at it and that deal is no longer there. At the end of the day, ultimately, you have to use your points. Don't sit around and wait to use them on the best deal possible, right? Like we always say, earn and burn. Don't sit there and let them grow. It's not an investment. It's not going to make you any more points by sitting there. But if you're a person that's incredibly flexible, then I think that can be for you. Wait around for whatever transfer bonus pops up and then use that transfer bonus for what you want. Because usually what I'll do is, as soon as there's a transfer bonus, I think in my head, what trips do I want to take next year? Do any of them work with these airlines? So that is the only way that I will evaluate it. If I find a good deal, I don't wait for a transfer bonus. And I think that happened to me maybe 3 times last year, that within 2 weeks, there was a transfer bonus for the exact airline that I had just booked on. And maybe it was with the different set of points that I did have, but it happens. You just got to let it go. It is what it is. Get another welcome offer and get more points. It's all going to be fine.
Yeah, I think it's important to prioritize what's most important to you. Is that you want to lock in the best deal possible with a transfer bonus, and you're willing to be a little bit more flexible on where and when you travel, just so you can get a really mathematically good deal? Do you not have that flexibility and you're like, I need to get this done? Are you just like, I have decision fatigue and we just need to book something, the points are expiring, especially if you have any kinds of points expiring, or that are stuck with a specific airline because you had to cancel a prior trip or something? So it depends on what you want to prioritize most. If you are the kind of person where you're like, I really want to try to predict transfer bonuses and when they're going to come up, we have a video on that. Avianca had 13 transfer bonuses in the last 2 years. The Avios programs with all 5 of the Avios airlines combined had about 20. So you can expect a transfer bonus with one of those approximately every other month. If you are like, what cards have the most transfer bonuses? It's with American Express. They tend to have more. But if you fly Air Canada a lot, Chase is the only one that really has Air Canada transfer bonuses. If you're like, I'm about quality instead of quantity of transfer bonuses, I need like 100%, or like, what's the mathematically best thing I could possibly do with a transfer bonus? The answer is going to be built. So it just depends on what is most important to you. Do you want like mathematically good deals? And if so, why? Do you have a YouTube channel where you show spreadsheets of the cents per point of your trips? Because I do, and most people who I talk to in my normal life do not care. And I would imagine most people listening to this are the same. Where if you think about the 5 people you text most, they're not going to care about your cents per point redemption. But if that is what you want to prioritize for, there are ways to do that. It's just hard to prioritize for everything at the same time because, like you said, the perfect storm rarely hits.
Exactly. It's very hard. I've seen it happen once or twice, but yeah, usually it's just when you find something, I say go for it and try to be as flexible as you can. And I think a lot of people need to spend time evaluating and realizing maybe they are more flexible than they realized, right? Like me, for example, when I thought I'm not going to reposition, that's kind of crazy. Why would I do that? But then I found one that works for me. I am flexible. I will reposition. Then if I get to go check out a new city or whatever it is, right? And then when we go to Europe, because my in-laws are in Dublin, I'll reposition to Dublin and then find a cheap flight to pretty much anywhere. Or if it's a cheaper option, sometimes I'll go and find, hey, why not go check out this new city where I found a good deal in? And so I think a lot of people just evaluate where you're willing to be flexible and see if you are, because sometimes just the adventure is what you're looking for. And maybe it doesn't have to be in a city you've even ever heard of, right? Maybe you do explore a new city or go somewhere you didn't think you were interested in, because that's kind of what me and my husband did when we were a country apart and I would have some free time. We wanted to spend time together. One time I went on Google Flights and the cheapest flight I could find within the next 3 days was to Frankfurt. Never in my life did I think I wanted to travel to Frankfurt, and nobody's ever told me you need to go see Frankfurt. But you know what? I loved Frankfurt. It was such a cool city. It was so much fun, and we had a blast for a week just on a random adventure. And I think sometimes people, and I get it if that's not you and that's not what you want to do, but I think some people, when they really think about it, they would be open to doing things like that and exploring a new place. And I guess just evaluating where you're flexible, right? If you want to go, from me, that was another thing in Norway. I wanted to go to Norway in July because July is the hottest and that's when I'm sick of the heat and I want to get out of here. But I found my deal in August. What does it matter to me if I go in July or August? So I go in August, right? Sometimes people just get tied to a day for a specific for some reason, or just think about maybe you can travel in a season rather than just focusing on a day. And maybe you can look on the West Coast as opposed to just Las Vegas, just Los Angeles, things like that. Or maybe you can look to repositioning in the second location, which is what a lot of people don't really think about, right? They feel like they need to fly into the place they want to go. Well, maybe can you fly into a place that's a 2-hour train right away and check out that city for a couple days, or even if you don't, just hop on a train right away, right? Just thinking of little ways that you can be flexible that can end up saving you so much money and so many points sometimes.
Fantastic advice. And speaking of great advice, can you give a shout out to somebody else on the internet that you recommend our listeners check out for even more points and miles tips?
I have been following Miles Beyond Borders. He is amazing. He has a ton of great deal. Like he explains everything really well, and he points out, I think, not only like good deals, but he also shows a little bit how if you don't have points, how buying points can make sense in certain situations. And then also for any Canadians listening out there, I know Fatima Flies Free is also a good one for Canadians. She's a friend of mine that I've met at Travel More Con.
Fantastic. And where can people find you on the internet?
So you can find me on Instagram. I am at the Points Fly Girl. I have started a YouTube as well, but I'm not as active on there. I've only done shorts. At some point, maybe I will do long form, but I also have a blog as well. So I'm at thepointsflygirl.com, and you can find my blog there. And I have my free resources, transfer chart, things like that. But on my blog as well, I talk a little bit. I have a couple of posts talking about credit card comparisons, as well as things like I talked about my Norway trip, and it broke down how I did that on points and some of the great deals that I got, including the overlooked one, transferring my city points to Choice and getting a killer deal in Oslo. And it breaks it all down. And I will eventually be doing a blog post on my Iceland travels as well, and how I use my points to help me out there.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again so much for joining us on the show today. I'm very excited to watch your Instagram and look at all of these fun trips that you're going to take to Maldives and Doha and Singapore and everywhere else you're planning to go.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me on the podcast.